Now, I would argue that if these kinds of, these three things go unaddressed, the new nuclear threats against NATO as well as the US are going to grow and be more uncertain in ways that we have never actually worked with. We don't know how to deal with, we may know how to deal with ramping up over 5 or 10 years with hundreds. I'm not sure we know how to deal with a breakout of an entire batch of bombs with an ally like South Korea or Japan, or a ramp up of an adversary from several hundred weapons in the case of China to 10 to 20,000. I am not arguing, nor should anyone think that this is what's going to happen. I think it's improbable, but we're not actually doing very much to make it less likely. In fact, the things the United States is doing, which is encouraging certain kinds of civil facilities that use reprocessing and making it worse, might want to rethink that, particularly if you're losing money in the process. Then, this is also true of the missiles, it's also true of the satellite. Hostile missiles will eclipse our ability to defend against them. Counterforce strikes against nuclear missiles will become extremely difficult because you're going to have so many targets. And there's another problem. When you have long-range missiles that can penetrate defenses and can accurately hit their target, that's going to mean that you're going to probably at some point run out of military targets. You're going to hit them all. And then, does anybody know what happened when we couldn't hit military targets in the Second World War? What did we do?
Bomb cities.
Bomb cities. Yippee! Does that make any sense? I mean, how many people lust in their heart to murder people that are innocent? Well, I guess a lot of us, by the way. You can look at polls, and it says that if the Iranians, for example, might strike one of our aircraft carriers and kill, I don't know, 2,000 people, we should go bomb Tehran and kill, I don't know, 2 million people. Sounds proportional. I am not keen on that. Just me. Also, what's interesting is the JCS, when Obama was trying to figure out how to get to 500 nuclear weapons, fought back saying, well, if you only have 500 nuclear weapons, you'd have to target them against cities, and the Geneva Convention says you're not supposed to do that because it isn't proportionate. Do you teach proportionality?
A little bit.
Yeah. Is anybody here Catholic?
Just for theory.
Thank you. Where are the Jesuits when we need them?
We're not Jesuit, we're independent.
You're independent, all right, well, that's your story, you can stick to it. But the point here is, you're allowed to kill innocents if the military benefit outweighs the amount of innocents killed. And I always say, if you win the war, everything you did to the other side was proportionate, and if you lost it, it wasn't. You know, it's just a little squishy.
Counter value versus counter force.
Yeah, whatever, but I'll tell you what, if you're Polish or Jewish in the Second World War, it wasn't proportionate. And if you're American, and if you're German or Japanese, it wasn't proportionate. But if you're American or British, it was. Sorry. It's not a science. It's a debating point, and it may make some sense, but boy, it's really hard to be honest. It's really hard to be honest with that. So, what's going to happen is you run out of targets, and you may want to end the war by killing innocents. And I am not wild about that, okay, personally, and I don't think our country should be. NATO military and civilian satellites critical to command and control surveillance will be at risk. Deterrence may be in space against these things instead of, you know, missile to missile or nuke to nuke. This can change things. Okay. Now, you got 5 more minutes?
Yes,
Go ahead.
exactly. 6.
6, okay. Arms control has a sort of sordid past. Some people really enthusiastic about it. I find it a little problematical, but surely you can use it to achieve military scientific goals of reducing the likelihood of war, reducing the destructiveness of war, and the costs of preparing for it. That's called the Schelling criteria. Thomas Schelling. All right. So there's another thing that you need to be successful in arms control negotiation. It's called a competitive advantage, or just an advantage. You don't want to go into a negotiation looking, as the president would say, weak. Right? And when you do, you don't come out looking like a winner, you come out looking like a loser. So if you take a look at the INF, and I have a pitch about INF, that treaty turned out to be pretty good, even though I was a critic of it. I was wrong. The proponents were wrong, because they didn't understand what was good about it. None of us knew what we were doing until after the Cold War. But that treaty, our missiles were better than theirs, not only physically, but because we could target their command and control centers, which were critical to their maintaining political control over the Soviet Union, whereas what they could target still might not achieve that kind of regime collapse. And they got very nervous when we put those Pershing IIs out, because they could actually destroy the command structures. And they gave up. So you need a comparative advantage. That negotiation, I should note, when we had a comparative advantage, took how long? 10 years. Okay, so any of you think we're going to have some arms control right away in the missile area? I don't know. It might require at least a different president. And even then, it could take a couple of weeks. I think we do have a competitive advantage in space. We have many more satellites. We have, I think, some of the best launch technology. But it's a wasting asset, that gap's closing. So my hunch is if arms control has a future, it might start, at least in the most serious way, with space. Missiles may take time. Also, we got a new problem that we never had before. Russia and China are getting awfully friendly. And it's a matter of great debate as to how friendly. But to the extent that they work together, you then have to do arms control that applies not just to one, but to both. That could be both a headache and maybe an opportunity. You might appeal to one party to get them to do something that doesn't sit well with the other party. But one of the major challenges for people who want to keep the peace of the world is how to keep these two from falling in love very much. If you can figure out how to make them wary of one another, please send in your suggestion. However, having said all that, being upfront and clarifying your narrative on arms control makes sense now. I'll tell you why. If you're a Trump person and you're trying to modernize your nuclear forces, your biggest problem is something called the House. It's Democrat. And the guy running the committee is all about arms control. So if you don't have a credible narrative on arms control, guess what? He's probably not going to give you a nickel for any of the modernizations that you think you need to compete with. Oh, well, you see where we're going here. Not only that, but it gets more interesting. The new reactionaries are, well, the Democrats. Why is that? Well, if you ask them what we should do, they say, well, let's just go back to INF. Let's go back to the Iran deal. Let's just renew. New start. The only difficulty with those things, no matter how good they might be, is that the problems I just addressed are not addressed by those kinds of moves. You're going to have to actually do something new. What will it be? It will be these things, I think. Why? Well, these are concrete. You can see them, they're tangible. It's not like artificial intelligence or cyber or anything. And they're already the matter of diplomatic negotiations. Not only that, but you may want to talk about new arms control now, because whenever you move from, let's say, a Trump to a Bernie Sanders, or a Bernie Sanders to a Trump, or an Obama to a Bush, there's a mood swing. I'm not sure I like that. It means what we spend our time doing is saying, well, whatever they wanted, we're against. And instead of thinking through, well, what is it that we should be doing as a nation, no matter who becomes president, we get caught into, well, whatever it is, it's the opposite of that. We need to modulate this. Suggestions. I think you'll read, if you'd like, some things that I've written with Brian Chow, who used to work with Albert Wohlstetter, who I studied under. You might want to create red lines by having space self-defense zones around key assets. A way to step toward that is a lot of launching is being done by private firms. And the satellites, to an increasing extent, are going to be private. They have to be insured. The insurance company could say, well, we don't want you hitting anything, therefore you need to stay away from certain things. And they could establish a standard that then would work for the Europeans. And if the Europeans and the Americans had the same standards, if the Chinese and Russians didn't agree to those standards, they wouldn't get insured. Ooh, loss of business. By the way, that's a brilliant idea, isn't it? That's my idea. It may not work. All right. We're trying to, I'm working with the American Bar Association to get them to try to figure out how to make that happen. Deploy bodyguard satellites. Right now, we're not. Figure out how to make them cheap. Negotiate international understandings on all of this. Probably the last thing on the list. You might want to do all these things at the same time, but you know, the most probable things. This is unilateral, this is sort of unilateral, but it involves lawyers, so it's got to take a couple extra hours to involve lawyers. Bodyguard satellites, you got to build something, pay for it, it takes a long time. And then, of course, international understanding, holy cow, you know, give yourself a decade. Okay. Formalize not striking cities. This is another little afterthought I had. You know, if you're Russian or Chinese, where are all your people? They're in cities. How many of you have driven across this country in a car? Did you notice there are a lot of places that are not New York City out there? Or LA or San Diego? We're not yet quite as urbanized. Therefore, it may be that we could get them to at least rhetorically agree that neither of us, any of us, should strike cities. Now, yeah, they could put missiles there and command centers there, but you know what? Deal with that later. You may want to take this off the table. Because when your missiles run out of targets, there's going to be some desperate stuff done. I'm not sure we want to encourage that. And you might get an agreement on that. I mean, you know, this is in the Department of things that you might want, that you might get. Let's see, you could do that in UN disarmament forums because the Geneva Convention proportionality already says that. You know? You're not reinventing things. Okay. You can work with the Russians and Chinese on that if you like. Oh, this one's Mickey Mouse. No, it isn't. It's a great idea. Let's just say we shouldn't enrich more than we have demand for enrichment in the civil sector, and let's not build any more new plants anywhere. Enough already is the Yiddish way of dealing with this. We've got enough. Until we run out, then we can build more. Maybe if we like nuclear weapons, we need tritium. Maybe we should buy the South Korean tritium. Save us from having to build ridiculous facilities ourselves. I don't know, but maybe you should say just no. I don't know. Moratorium on recycling. It's just simply not needed for promoting nuclear power. Missiles. How about you say, the boost phase, at least for the most part, with the off-the-shelf stuff, only works if you can fly in a safe area over water. So that would be North Korea and maybe near Iran. Now, just so happens, this is a demonstration of providence. What if you had a rule that said, if you violate the NPT, I'm not sure the Iranians have, but I'm sure the North Koreans have, you forfeit your sovereign right to launch nuclear-capable missiles as defined internationally by the Missile Technology Consortium. And if you do, we might take it out. Unless, of course, you come into compliance with the NPT, in which case, yay! Just a thought. Now, it could be that you argue this and you don't get anywhere, but it's a great argument. And if it is a great argument, you might get some of your allies to agree. Maybe not everybody, probably not the North Koreans. But you know what? If you ever had to act, that would be useful. Oh, missile systems, starting with INF systems. Limit hypersonic technology. At least, can we all agree that we shouldn't spread it out to India and other countries? That was a Rand idea. The guy who wrote it worked for me, Dick Schroeder. It's not much, but you know, you get started. And then missile limits. My favorite, which will probably never happen, is you say, the Russians can hold on to the missiles that violate the INF Treaty, but they have to deploy them east of the Urals, over here. And if they do, of course, that'll drive the Chinese nuts. Yay. And if the Chinese go nuts, then you say, well, how about you get rid of some? I don't know. Great talking point. Probably not a way to get rich or famous, but something we ought to be articulating. You'll notice that Mr. Bolton talks about the need to get China involved. I'm going to say that wasn't an accident. We got the brief.